I can't live like this anymore. And I don't know what this is, but it is this consuming, gnawing anxiety. And I was sort of at the height of my career. And I think when I had these consuming anxiety cycles earlier in my life, I was like, it's because I just don't have enough. I'm not, someday I'll feel more calm and measured about my life. And then I got to this point where I'm like, well, I've kind of achieved it and I feel worse than I've ever felt. And I will never outrun these feelings of not being enough.
Welcome to Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan. This show is about making the world a more loving, accepting, and compassionate place, one parent, one person, and one child at a time. The key to raising healthy and engaged kids is for parents to seek the same in their own lives while striving to be the best versions of themselves each day. No matter who you are or where you came from, with increased awareness, you can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint for your children, your family, and all those you care about while living your own life to the fullest. Today's show, which I am so excited to introduce, is on our best behavior, the 7 deadly sins and the price women pay to be good, with Elise Loehnen. Elise is a writer, editor, and podcast host who lives in LA with her husband and 2 sons. She's the host of Pulling the Thread, a podcast focused on pulling apart the stories we tell about who we are and then putting those threads back together. Ultimately, Elise is a seeker and synthesizer, braiding together wisdom, traditions, cultural history, and deep knowledge of healing modalities to unlock new ways to contextualize who we are and why we're here. While she's co-written 12 books, including 5 New York Times bestsellers, her first book under her own name, the title of this show, is On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good, which was also an instant New York Times bestseller. Previously, Elise was Chief Content Officer of Goop, where she co-hosted the Goop podcast and the Goop Lab on Netflix and led the brand's content strategy and programming. Finally, Elise is a frequent contributor to Oprah, has written for the New York Times, Elle Decor Stylist, and many, many more. And last but not least, anyone who knows Elise and her work knows she reads and thinks a lot. Elise, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'm a fellow overthinker. Well, I don't know if I'm not going to call you an overthinker. I think a lot. So I recognize thinkers and I appreciate that. Okay. So I want to start with how this conversation came to be. And because it's very important, that we talk about this. It's also central to a lot of the what you're putting out in terms of the programming that we have in society. And so on your newsletter a few months ago, you were writing how it's just, I'm going to use the word astonishing. I was shocked that not one male podcaster, with the exception of a male in Australia who's a radio host a while back when your book came out, had invited you to be on the show, their podcast, to talk about your New Times bestselling book, New York Times bestselling book. Mm-hmm. And here you are, someone who, as a podcaster, who have interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of amazing thinkers of all shapes, sizes, genders, ways of life. And you're not getting invited. And yet men, the big time podcasting men, are all inviting each other. And it seems to be helping them. And not only are you not getting invited, but there's also this thing where women that you would think would be inviting you onto their show to talk about is not happening either. Yeah. So I was, as I said in my email, I was actually blown away, and I felt compelled to write you and give you my thoughts and say, would you please be on this show?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I ended up doing the series of newsletters on my Substack, which has the same name as my podcast, Pulling the Thread. And I had started working on this first newsletter. It was going to be an op-ed for a paper, and then it became complicated. And I had done this audit of these shows, in part because someone had said to me, a friend had said, "Oh, I hope you're going to go on Sam Harris's show." And I had an immediate reflexive answer, which was, "Oh, he doesn't interview women."
Oh.
And then I was like, is that true? I have no idea where that came from, but I think it was just an internal intuitive reaction to having listened. No, I don't listen compulsively to Sam Harris, but having tuned in over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had done this audit of men in sort of the health and wellness and spiritual, just thinky podcasts, and that are somewhat similar to my world. And the stats were astonishing in terms of the presence of female experts and authorities and doctors and scientists. If you listen to those shows, you would have the impression, understandably, that these women don't exist, that the only people who are expert in our culture are men. And when I did this audit, it was so sad. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's like Andrew Huberman had at that point interviewed 12 women over the course of his show. It was, I think, 8%, 10%. Andrew, Peter Attia is at like 11%. Sam Harris, 11%. Tim Ferriss, 11%. Even people like Jay Shetty, who are more representative. It's hard. It's kind of a different show because it's so many celebrities. And so, but he was at like in the high 30s, maybe 40, which is acceptable, I think. But yeah, it's shocking. And the reason that I wanted to do it isn't that I think I don't want to do Huberman's show, and I'm not an appropriate guest for him, but that's a whole nother conversation, Dan. But
that is, yes.
but that there are legion of female experts. In fact, women are outpacing men in terms of earning biomedical PhDs, outpacing men in medical school. And yet these men can't seem to find any worth platforming. They'll talk about their work sometimes without actually interviewing them. And so that to me needed to be called out, because we don't, as consumers of this, we're not conscious of it. Some people knew and were like, yes, I've noticed this, but so many people wrote to me and said, oh my God, I had no idea. We're just so used to seeing men in this position of expert and women as not. And I was thinking about it because, too, for example, and Jonathan Haidt does amazing work. No shame on Jonathan Haidt, but I've been watching him make the rounds on press and podcasts, and he is everywhere for his book about social media and the anxiety of children. And then I think about my friend, Elise, Dr. Elise Pressman, who has a podcast called Raising Good Humans, PhD in childhood and developmental psychology, head of the Mount Sinai Childhood Institute. And she similarly had not been interviewed by a single man. And I look at sort of what he's doing as like a journalist and thinker, and how embraced he is across the board, and all the men want to interview him, and she is not. So it's these unconscious patterns that I'm so interested in, because they live deeply in us. And then the part about women not interviewing me, I ended up writing 3 more parts to this. Who gets to be an expert? This idea of scarcity, which for women is very real and for men it's not. And the fact that these men, these very powerful men in the podcasting world, all they all host each other constantly and are constantly promoting each other, sort of proving the reality that scarcity isn't true, because they've all just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger as a result of it. But women don't do that. And where I've had a lot of support for my book, but it's been from people who are not in my lane. And the people who I would have expected, who I've supported in the past, who I would have expected to sort of be like, this, I can't wait to have this conversation with you. Nothing. No podcast invitations, no Instagram stories, silence. And
Huh.
that's really deep for women, both scarcity and it's in my
Mm-hmm.
book. It's this sense, envy,
Yes.
scarcity.
Right.
Um, it's very real. And I don't think that we realize that we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about envy because I know that is one of the sins that does get a lot of press and people are interested in. And it really struck home with me too. So I'm looking forward to diving into envy. But before we do that, do you think? So I'm reading your book as a man, and
Yep.
as a man in the patriarchy, and as a man who is in the field of emotions and is someone who is naturally like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm a person in this. I'm a consumer of it. I live in this, and I was thinking as I was reading, you are pulling back the veil. You are calling out many, many things. I mean, from the history of religion, how this stuff all started, calling out women, but in a way like women, like look at yourselves, look what we're doing, look at our life, look how hard this is, look how we can't win. And I'm not saying this in a complaining way. It's more like you're holding up the mirror. I'm wondering if this mirror is too hard for some people and they're just like turning away from it.
Yeah. Well, likely because the book is really, and I put myself in it. I wrote myself into it for a number of reasons, but partly to show, like, to say, like, hey, this is in me too. Like, this is deep. I'm not gonna sort of diagnose culture from afar and say, you all need to fix this, or men, this is your fault, and you need to stop this oppressive behavior. What I was interested in is, yes, there are highly patriarchal men in our culture. Certainly, there are also highly patriarchal women.
Mm-hmm.
And there are women who behave in toxically masculine ways, just as there are men who behave in toxically masculine ways. There are men who are very in touch with their feelings, very in touch with the feminine side of their nature, very caring and creative, and the things that we sort of typically assign as more feminine values. I wish that both of those words could be divorced from gender, but
Mm-hmm.
but they're not. Um, but yes, I think it is in some ways confrontational. And I think in some ways it's annoying because typically what we do um, in our culture is we love, I've done a fair amount of work about the drama triangle, but we love to assign blame and we like to make ourselves victims and we like to say, this is your fault. You are oppressing me, or I don't have what I want because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are real victims in our culture. I'm not suggesting for that, and I'm not saying that things like systemic racism are not profoundly real and that misogyny isn't very real. So we have huge issues in many of our systems and structures. But I think where it gets tricky is when we start to try to like be really hard on people. It's like, be hard
Mm-hmm.
on the structure. Let's look at pay gap. Let's look at all of these. Let's look at the wealth gap. Let's look at these systems of inequity that we keep perpetuating. But let's try to be soft with each other and also try to understand where this is alive in us, because that's what we can address. That's immediately what we can address.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the fear, I think for men, I was talking to my agent about this and the fact that men weren't engaging with the book, and that the men who had, friends of mine, people like you, were like, oh my God, I loved this. This explains so much. I feel like I understand my partner so much better. I feel like I didn't like understand this until I read this book. I really feel like I understand the psychology of quote unquote women. And she was like, well, I think unfortunately, like, one, men are scared. They think that it's a book that's going to make them feel bad. It's
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
And two, she's like, I always worry that, women are really interested in men. I don't know that men are really interested in women.
Hmm.
And that to me felt kind of true in the way that wherever you are sort of in our hierarchy of marginalization or oppression, like you typically know a lot about the people who have more power than you do and are not so interested in the people who have less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's multi-layered, and I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad you're writing about it. You it was courageous. I mean, first of all, it's courageous to how you put yourself in the book, which I understand was not your first, was not the first idea that you were thinking. So I'm curious about putting yourself, like the process of putting yourself out there to all of us. And then once you did, because you're the stuff that I'm reading, you're still doing it constantly. And does it start to flow and feel in
Mm-hmm.
purpose once you get over that idea?
Yeah. Well, I think that what I came to understand, and it started when I started hosting the Goop podcast. And again, I've had this long career, and I write about this in the chapter on Pride of ghostwriting. I really like ghostwriting, of working for brands, standing sort of behind
Mm-hmm.
more visible founders or editors in chief. I started in magazines, but I worked at magazines without bylines. So there's this I have had a long track record. And part of it is that I'm introverted and I like to do a lot of my thinking privately. But it was really when I started co-hosting the Goop podcast. And I assumed that people would be like, oh, I don't want to listen to her. I only want to listen to her very famous
Mm-hmm.
boss.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting to sort of watch the show develop because, yes, I'm sure there were a lot of people who tuned out of my episodes, but there were a lot of people who tuned in and who felt like I was a proxy for them or that I was asking the questions that they wanted to ask or would ask if they were in the same seat. I got some of it projection, but a lot of like relation. Like, I feel like we're the same person. Oh, we've had so many of the same experiences. And that was a very powerful experience for me because it felt, one, very safe and loving, which is not often what you get online when you're a visible woman.
Mm-hmm.
And and also sort of like a little bit of it's okay, it's safe. So when my editor was like, please put more of you in this book, you have to show us how you relate to the sins and then bring us through this material. It was an easier yes than it would have been 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized is there's a fine balance with memoir. In fact, I wrote a newsletter about this today about the cosmic egg, because what I see happening in our culture is that Richard Rohr talks about how the me story is nestled in the we story, which is then nestled in sort of quote unquote the story, and how we have this fractured egg right now because we're in the pattern of postmodernism and tearing everything apart, and we don't have any collective myths, any collective beliefs anymore, any collective rites, rituals, and we're in this period of culture where we only care about our uniqueness and everything that makes us different than everyone else. And this is great. It's great that we have sort of a new awareness of this.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to do was to do that and then bring it back to the we story. I didn't know that this is what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But within my book, it was very important to me that I tell my stories in a way that we're like, this is kind of a shared experience. And there are going to be a lot, you might not relate to all of my stories, but that most of them are going to be sort of like, yes, me as well. And because I think that we desperately need that. And it's true, you know, right. But, because you're a therapist, it's like in the age of therapy too, I think we're all sort of like, everything that's happening to me is only happening to me. And it's only happening to me because of my parents or these situations. And so much of it is actually cultural and bigger and far more expansive than like whether your mom breastfed you or not,
Right.
Not to say that's not important.
For people to not feel alone, to understand their shared experiences. And I do think that with platforms that people like you and others have who talk about themselves and talk about their struggles, it's a unifying togetherness that occurs for so many who do feel alone and do feel they're the
Yes.
only ones and do feel stuck. And you actually start, I mean, I'm pulled in right away because it's 2018 and you're in your therapist's office and your chest is going to explode, right? It's like an elephant on your chest, and you have that hyperventilation feeling, which you recently wrote about again. I know it's something that comes and goes.
Yeah.
It's yeah. And I wanted to bring that out to the degree you want to talk about it, because that is what
Yes.
so many of us understand anxiety and don't understand anxiety. Like it's you can put your hands around it, and then yet at the same time you can't, and it is the most among the most terrible feelings,
It's
all
such
the
a
way
sucker.
right,
Yes.
all the way up to panic attack, the whole continuum of anxiety to panic. And there you are, and this, I know, was not new to you, but the catalyst to start digging into all of this.
Yes. Um, and it's interesting because I'm in a pattern right now, and I haven't had a prolonged pattern in years. And am now starting to understand it on a different level, which we can talk about as well. But yeah, so it's called chronic hyperventilation. And this is I knew this would be a side effect of the book too, that primarily women have written to me saying, "Oh my God, I never, like, this is my experience. I could never get a name for it. I didn't know what it was. Thank you for telling me what it is, even." My dad's a pulmonologist, he's a lung doctor, ironically. So that's
Mhm.
how I know what it is. And my mom has this pattern, and so does my aunt.
Mhm.
And what chronic hyperventilation is you're not breathing rapidly into a paper bag, but you are subtly over breathing, and your lungs have too much oxygen, but you don't feel over oxygenated, and so you go to take a deep breath and you can't.
Mhm.
And anyone listening can imagine that that is a panic inducing feeling
Mhm.
of, holy shit, I can't breathe. Sorry, didn't
Mhm.
mean to swear.
Yeah,
I
you
can't
may.
breathe.
Yeah.
And then it creates a cycle where you are trying to take a deep breath, and you start yawning and
Mhm.
sighing and doing anything to open up your airways.
Mhm.
And typically when I get into a pattern, I can do it for months. It's
Mhm.
usually sort of a later in the day onset. The more I think about trying to correct my breathing, and I've certainly
Right.
tried and worked with a lot of people, sometimes the more um, provoked I can get.
Mhm.
And it's very debilitating
Mhm.
because you are spending a lot of your energy thinking, am I going to breathe this time or am I not?
Yeah.
And I can get through my life. I'm not incapacitated, but I am totally distracted by my
Mhm.
breathing and also the exhaustion that it creates in my body and the yawning and sighing. So I appear to the world as though I'm narcoleptic, or sleep
Mhm.
deprived, but inside it's this feeling of I cannot breathe. And at various points in my life, it has and I'm in one of these patterns right now, but the one that I wrote about, which was part of the genesis or catalyst for this book, was this, like, I can't live like this anymore. And I don't
Mhm.
know what this is,
Mhm.
but it is this consuming, gnawing anxiety that I thought I had convinced myself. At this point,
Mhm.
I'm 40 years old when I'm in my therapist's office. And I was sort of at the height of my career. And I think when I had these consuming anxiety cycles earlier in my life, I was like, it's because I just don't have enough. I'm not,
Mhm.
someday I'll feel more calm and measured about my life. And then I got to this point where I'm like, well, I've kind of achieved it, and I
Right.
feel worse than I've ever felt. And I will never outrun these feelings of not being enough, not being thin enough, not being
Mhm.
smart enough, not being
Mhm.
accomplished enough, not having the
Mhm.
safety, security, approval, control, whatever it is
Right.
that drives us. And so I knew I needed to sort of get my hands around this boogeyman. I needed to understand what it was. And I feel like I've made some serious inroads now that it's back. And I've been doing a lot of work. I'm like physical work, like I'm going to have my tongue tie finally released to see if I can get some structural movement or structural support. But I also feel like there's what's happening in me is my book has done well. It's not like a runaway bestseller, gusher, et cetera, but it's done well. And there is this part, what I can feel in my body, and I bet that people who are listening can relate, is I can feel a conflict in my throat and chest of like me trying to force air down. And my body is like, no, you have to let all this energy come up and probably some emotion. Let's be real. But like, you have to let this happen. Like you have to let yourself continue to get bigger because when I think about my book, I'm like, oh, I'm very happy. It's exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to do well, but not too well because I want to be a private person. And I think now I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm going to blow up.
Yeah.
And that's very scary.
That is really, to not
physically blow up.
That. Yeah. Physically blow up. I mean, it is.
Just
okay. I've got
everywhere.
a lot of thoughts right now. Yeah, I got this image of you all over your office right now, right there. You're
like a marshmallow man.
Yeah. And humor does help. Laughter does help. So I have a few thoughts. So first, I want to acknowledge of just my own experiences with anxiety and also with my some early childhood experiences with some asthma. Like the idea of not being able to, it's terrible. Like it's terrible. And then, like you said, for everyone listening, it's just the spiral of what we know about the panic cycle is usually we then have thoughts that make it worse, right? Like, oh my God, what happens if I can't breathe? And am I going to die? And is this ever going to stop? And of course then we have more and more adrenaline surges on whatever the original issue, physiological, psychological, emotional, and it is multifaceted, as you point out. I think about to me, it is so symbolic. So for so many years, you were very successful helping make other people and organizations and projects successful. And this is like being pushed out on stage with the spotlight. I know you're not you're not completely being pushed, but I feel like you are also being pulled by purpose. Like you can't not do what you're doing right now, is my sense. You're just being pulled to speak, to, again, hold up the mirror, shed the light, try to do what you do, which is pull everything together and make us think. And there's conflict. They're like serious. I can understand, imagine conflict in that.
Big time. Yeah. I work sometimes. I have an amazing therapist who's a Jungian, and then occasionally I work with this woman, Ann Emerson, who is in Sedona, as they all are, and she's an amazing intuitive who also. But her main thing isn't really that; it's more working with your limiting self-conscious beliefs. And so you just call Ann when you need a set. You're like, I need you. She's hilarious and like full of Al-Anon wisdom and this like amazing laugh. And she's like a mother to me. And she said, she's like, I don't really like the word manifestation. She's like, but to me, manifestation is just losing the conflict. And she was talking about me, but she was like, you are full of conflicts about like money and all of this stuff. And there was something about that statement where I was like, oh, that is exactly right. It's like, it's so many of my, like with money, so much of it is like, well, if I had enough, then I don't think I would be able to compulsively drive myself to create and produce, so many of these old cycles. And if I let myself be more seen, I don't want to be more seen. I don't want to be like, I want to stay in this corner of my bedroom where I am right now. So it's that for me, which I'm sure so many people who are listening can relate to. But as you said, yes, I'm being pulled and I'm being, I've always been like a little psychic, but or like more of a cultural psychic and part
Mhm.
of it I'm like, well, I just see a lot of stuff. So
Right.
I see it,
Hmm.
but I also am like can anticipate some of these bigger
Yes.
moments, and it's hard not to respond to that. And I feel like that's what's also coming up in me is like you got to keep going. You're not done. You're not
Yeah.
done
No, you're not done. Um, I think you're actually just
getting
beginning.
started.
Yeah, I do.
We'll
In this
see.
next chapter plateau of your life, and you are highly intuitive, um,
Hmm.
both I think internally, interpersonally, and culturally. Like that is one of your skills, your superpowers, is able to pull all this stuff together, and it just
It's not
seems
that
like you're
fun,
on this
Dan.
journey. I know. Well, I can relate to some of that. Yes, it's like it's like a bird. It's a calling and a burden.
Burden.
Right? It's
Yes, it's
and when you
hard.
yeah, it is. And when you can't not, that's notable. Like when you can't not do something, when you're just like, okay, I see that going on. There's a train wreck there. Okay, I'm just going to turn around and walk the other way, or
Are you an
I'm not going to
Enneagram
say
type
anything.
6? Do you know your
Uh,
Enneagram
oh
number?
gosh, I did it a while ago, and I do believe. Remind me, is that
So
what's
I
6?
think I'm a 6. I often type as a 1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but 6s are I love the way my friend Courtney teaches the Enneagram because she talks about every type having sort of that you could call it their vice, but she really calls it a strategy for dealing with underlying fear and anxiety.
Mm.
But the Enneagram type 6, the vice is actually fear. So like the Enneagram of a type 1, it's anger about like everything should be this way. I understand how things should be. And, it's
Mm-hmm.
about integrity and wholeness. And I love the
Yes.
Enneagram because all of the types are so wonderful. There's no
Yeah.
like bad
Yes.
type,
No pathologizing. Yeah.
no pathologizing. But a 6, fear is the vice. And so her point about 6s is that 6s are just very present with reality,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't really have a strategy aside from like going into the fear and anxiety itself.
Mm.
And one of the things about a 6 is they call it the skeptic, but actually they call it the 6 the psychic because and this has been my experience, and maybe it's probably as a therapist and very much might be yours, which
Mm-hmm.
is I have an uncanny ability to know exactly what's going to happen, whether it's in an interpersonal dynamic or the success of a business idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds great, but it's actually a terrible place to have to occupy because you just end up coming across as negative and again skeptical. Um, and when everyone wants like a cheerleader or a corroborator or someone to say like this is an excellent idea and you should do this, and you're the only one who's like, oh my god, this
Yeah.
is a
No.
terrible idea and I can tell you
No.
everything that will unfold.
Yeah.
Nobody acts, everyone pretends like they want someone in
Right.
that seat,
Right.
but it's a hard seat.
It is. Yes. So I relate to a lot of that, and what's making me think of is my wife, who is my biggest support, as I say, to fight the worry monster. And I'll say, we always try to ground each other, like, let's just stay present, whether it's related to the kids or related to something, like, let's just stay present. And here's the thing. We know that our thoughts about worry and fear are all future based. What if this happens? What if this happens? And what are we going to do if this happens? And so I'll say that, and she'll, hey, let's stay right here. Like, let's stay right here. And you know what? She's right theoretically, but what I often try to express, I'm like, I just know how this is going to play out, and I'm trying to prepare for it. Like, I know where this is going to go. So I feel like they're both true. Like, with that fear, we get ahead of ourselves
Yes.
and we future trip too much. And with the knowing, it is a bind because you see things unfolding before they do, and you're trying to prepare for them or help other people prepare for them.
Yeah. And it gets into sort of avenues of control. And I've
Yeah.
had to learn, and you're a therapist, so you'll also relate where when people come to me, it's like, do you want to be counseled or do you want to be consoled? And I'm not the
Mhm.
best at consoling. I'm good at
Yeah.
counseling, but it's like, okay, but do you really want to know
Right.
what I think? Because it might not conform with what you want to hear.
Right.
Don't be mad at me
Mm-hmm.
when I say no.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and then of course for me there's like the attachment to being right where I'm like, but I know I'm right. I know I'm
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not a great
Yeah.
it's not a great seat.
The word that's coming to me as you're describing being in these situations is authentic and authenticity, which I know we're using a lot these days, but is so important. And like your book, what you write about in your book, your from my vantage point, your stories and what you are doing now is about being authentic, like trying
Mhm.
to be authentic. And I do have a belief the more authentic we can be, ultimately, the less in distress we feel on a micro and macro
Yes.
level, right? And so when you're talking about being in these situations with people, it's like this, well, there might be interpersonal conflict, but you will, if you stay authentic and true to yourself with this authenticity and coming with like your truth, your love, your compassion, it's about that internal state of continuing to be in a more um, peaceful interstate as opposed to a tangled up and anxious one.
Yes. And it's interesting because the book is about uses this framework of the seven deadly sins. And for context, like I did not grow up, I'm not affiliated with any religion, and I did not grow up in a religious household. I'm very spiritual. Um, but so it's interesting that I was like, but I think many of us recognize like religion is culture. This is everything. It's all baked together as much as we want to separate church and state, and we
Hmm.
should. But that our culture is highly influenced by many of these ideas for the better and for worse. And the original idea of sin is hamartia, which is missing the mark. And so it's not about damnation and penalization. It's supposed to be this interior GPS system, right? Of
Hmm.
what does it look like to actually be in touch with yourself, with your wants and your desires and your instincts and ideally the divine in some way or some higher force or some purpose, if you use that word, or the daemon, right? Like the
Hmm.
whatever it is that wants to come through you. And I think so many of us are acculturated and programmed to listen to these exterior voices about what it is to be a good woman or what it is to be a powerful man. And that's the script that's running. And
Hmm.
it completely disconnects and sort of scrambles our inner GPS. And the more we can authenticity or alignment of, yes, like my friend and I are co-leading a retreat next month, and we were talking about this. As she's talking about it as a full body yes between your mind, heart, and your body. Of like, yes, this is what I want for dinner, or yes, this is a job for me. But we're so disembodied, we're so dysregulated, we're so conditioned by culture to be like, what am I supposed to want? And what am I supposed to do? And how am I supposed to behave? That it
Hmm.
can be incredibly hard to get reconnected with ourselves.
Hmm.
But I think it's could be very easy, particularly if more of us do it and we can start turning down those cultural dials and turning up our own agency and our own,
Right.
those inner voices.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, balance, right? I liked your quote at the end, um, which I have right here, which is, "It's not about achieving balance; it's about being balanced."
Yes.
Which even that is a tall order, but
Yeah.
it's so important when I think about achievement and what some people know about you is also, I mean, you are a highly achievement oriented person from that type of family, right? So you are, I just got to, give the props here. So, was it eighth grade math athlete, Olympian champion. And I think at age 10, you were like a downhill
I
skiing
was a
world
mogul. I was
mogul.
first in the country for mogul skiing when I was 10.
10,
There weren't
right?
that
So,
many other women,
yeah.
but
Oh,
yes,
come on. Okay. Come on.
it's
Let's
a
not.
new sport.
Yeah. That. So that's a level of focus and intensity and drive. And how, as you talk about like how to be your best but not be too much right now as a
Yes.
woman, right? Like be the best but don't be the best, because that's going to make other people uncomfortable. That's going to make other people envious. And
Yes.
be really, really good but not too good. And you could say this with body type, with dating, with like all the things that you go through. And
Mhm.
it is it about, in your experience now and what your process that you continue to go through, how do you calibrate? Like how are you thinking about yourself in context of the sins, and how to keep stepping forward to be your best self while also trying not to hear all of the programming that's
Yeah.
saying like you know you're too tall, you need to be a little shorter, a little quieter here.
Yeah. It's a lot of, I mean, the work, it was an intense experience, as you can imagine, writing this book, far more intense than I thought, of contending with each of these sins, which are, to remind people, sloth, pride, envy, greed, gluttony, lust, anger. And then there's an eighth, which was on the original list that was cut, which is sadness. And
Right. Right.
I've had to sort of, as I wrote, I had to contend with each one, but they're all an onion to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and some of them, as I was writing them, I was like, oh, I have really perfected like anti-sloth. I have really perfected some of them, like so dialed in terms of my perfection about never being accused of being lazy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though, as I've come to understand about myself, like there are weeks when I just want to be on the couch watching 90 Day Fiance, and like I need to let myself rest and have
Mm-hmm.
that reprieve. So and now it's like I'm starting the process of going back into them and doing the next layer, which is deeper around like for me, I'm like I money, I this is far deeper than me feeling like I've achieved an acceptable bank balance where I'm going to be able to support my family. Now I got to really go into this law of scarcity
Mm-hmm.
and how deeply I am driven by fear of not
Mm-hmm.
having enough. So it's a process,
Yeah.
but I in a weird way, and this is that you mentioned the word balance, and like the fact that I think the sins are very powerful ideas. Not to say the book isn't like a stunty, let's go be lustful and gluttonous and envious, but it's the balance, right? Like the more you repress these ideas, the more you're going to project them onto other people. Like we're full of them. They're part of our humanity. This is like you
Right.
can't claim goodness and say I'm not bad at all, quote unquote, of course. We all have our appetites and desires. We all need balance
Yes. Yes.
and not denial, not abnegation, not and not necessarily maybe overindulgence either. So in a way, it's just like I'm using them as
Mm-hmm.
ongoing ways to calibrate myself. And there's a lot of deep work,
Yes.
re-embodiment, healing my relationship with food, because like every woman, I have a damaged relationship with food and
Mm.
restricting and permitting and
Right.
shaming myself and saying very cruel things to myself and having a distorted view of my body. And I'm not done with that work, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's seemingly in this human condition a continual work in progress. And I think if we're being kind to ourselves, it's just doing the work, having the awarenesses, continuing to try to consciously go to the dark spaces. You talked about the Jungian work, the shadow, right? Go to our shadows and pull them out, even though we want to keep a lot of the stuff like behind the closet door, or we're afraid of what's going to happen if we actually open it. It's it's such important work for you, us adults, and it's so important for our kids, right? To go
Yes.
there. Like, it's so important. Like, the more work we do on ourselves, the more our kids benefit from our growth. And even when we go to talk about the intergenerational transmission of trauma, which can go back 14 generations, like with each generation, if we can evolve a little bit, it helps a lot going downhill.
Yes. 100%. It helps. I think just to be like, just for me, it's not even about, again, it's like not trying to be perfect. It's just with my children, trying to just be more conscious. That's it.
Mhm. Right.
And more sort of like, oh, this is happening for me right now. I
Mhm.
know I'm being really grumpy. I don't think I slept well. It's really not your fault. But I'm really grumpy.
Mhm.
Rather than like, again, finding a reason to be like, I'm going to make you responsible, Max, for my irritation because you won't get out of bed.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's this just awareness, because I think when
Yes.
you can show your children that you're in a process of self-discovery and of recognizing that like sometimes things are happening or coming out of you that you can't control, creates a lot more space for kids to be like, I'm just grumpy. I just don't feel well.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's a response to my own childhood where my parents are wonderful and they did a great job, but there wasn't a lot of room for my own feelings about things. It was more about sort of performance and being a good kid and doing the things. And it was my
Mhm.
parents were very judgmental and slightly shaming about, not about like crying or stuff like that, but like if I didn't want to do something or I was complaining or I was in a bad mood, there wasn't any space for that.
Mhm.
So I'm trying
Yeah.
to give more room to that for my kids more grace for myself.
Right. I was wondering how you, having going through this process and writing this book, having two boys, how you think about raising them in a way to understand the patriarchal forces that exist, as well as holding on to their what are called the more feminine qualities, right?
Yeah.
Of being which they shouldn't be, of being in touch with their emotions and having compassion and taking other people's point of view, right? Like, do you think about it differently with them?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it in the sense of just keep trying to keep them attached to what they're feeling. That's my primary
Hmm.
motivation, is
Hmm.
to let them have their feelings, particularly when I don't think they're being used manipulatively. Like there are times with my
Right.
older
Right.
son when I'm like, you can't cry about this. I'm sorry. But um because to me that feels like, not like when he's using it to sort of be like,
Yeah.
I'm
Not
not getting the
authentic. Not
thing.
authentic.
And
Yeah. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but for them, it's been sort of letting them be connected and to their loneliness or whatever's
Hmm.
happening at school, and saying like, I hear you. And it's good that you feel this like deeply. Let yourself feel it deeply. Cause I think for men in particular, that severing from feelings, that sort of manning up,
Hmm.
is so dangerous.
Yeah. So dangerous. You, in your book, I wanted to call out a few things that have really impacted my life. Actually, my son had recommended I read these two books after he did. One was Bell Hooks' A Will to Change, and then
Mhm.
um, also then Terry Reel's I Don't Want to
Yes.
Talk About It. And
So good.
man, so powerful, so powerful. And so I just want to say for how important it is, and also for men listening, how important it is to really for us to understand how the patriarchy works and how it plays on us and how it plays on us as dads with our sons, this programming that we get of how we're supposed to raise them to be, quote, successful, which often means pulling them away from themselves. And as Terry Real always talks about, basically is like hurt people, right?
Yes.
And so all of this, this depression and anger that men experience, it impacts them, and it also impacts, of course, all the women in their life, in the present and in the future. And just we have to keep talking about this.
Yes. 100%.
Okay, we're just at the end. I have to ask my question, but I wanted to say I want to ask one more just piece about the anger.
Yeah.
And your awareness of, wait, I'm actually angry. And the more that I am become aware of this, I think at times the angrier I get. So I want to just process how it seems like you're using the anger. You're aware of it and you're using it.
Yeah. I am much more. So what I was doing, my pattern, which was to higher mind my anger and to justify all the reasons that I was mad, and then sort of problem solve and come up with the solutions for sort of like how to not be angry. And it was Ann Emerson, the woman I mentioned, who was like, "You're furious, just FYI." And just even acknowledging that helps me it helps me, or gave me permission to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm pissed. I'm pissed." And that learning how to interrogate that and how to allow it. And the book is all about sort of how we're conditioned away from this, and how women in particular are conditioned to be very covert with our aggression. And so just the conscious awareness that it's present and that, yes, I am angry, was a big unlock for me. And I don't think I've gotten to the bottom of like my well of anger, but again, like as with all of these things, it's been a really powerful process for me to let that be a thing in my life.
Right. Allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew.
Okay. Well, that takes us right up to the parent footprint moment question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Tell us about a time that you became aware of yourself as an individual, as a parent, or even an awareness of your own parents, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your life, your kids, and or those you love.
Yeah. So this is I think a fascinating, I'm sure you get fascinating responses to this. I was thinking about this recently because I was reconnected with her, but it was the mother of my college boyfriend, who's incredible. And we all went on vacation together when I was in college, and she had a second sort of family, much younger children. She'd had my boyfriend at the time when she was very young. And she, at that point, was younger than I am now. And we spent this week together. And it was just this like watching her. And I feel like she even said this to me directly. Like, I don't know how I became an adult. Like, I feel like I'm the same age as you.
Yeah.
And I don't know how this happened. And this chaos. And it was really interesting because I was theoretically officially an adult, and to sort of sit at this nexus and watch her and be like, oh, this is what happens. And like adults are just like us. And are still in this process of growing up, and there's no magical portal, there's no doorway. There was something about that week that left an indelible impression upon me and made me so much more compassionate towards my own parents, and to see like, oh, they're still growing up.
Totally.
Wow. I had no idea that this doesn't end.
Oh yeah, that's good. What a moment that stuck with you.
Yes,
all
very
those
much.
years ago. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't end.
It doesn't
does
end,
not
Dan.
end. No, we get older, we keep learning stuff. Our kids get older, they keep teaching us stuff. And how do we lean into the goodness and excitement and curiosity of that, as opposed to that fear,
The fear.
the fear. Elise, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
this
you. This was such a pleasure.
conversation. Please tell everyone about your stuff, all the Pulling the Thread, your books, your main book, what you're doing.
Yeah. So my book is called On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good. And I have a podcast called Pulling the Thread. I also have a Substack newsletter, eliseloehnen.substack.com, which is also called Pulling the Thread. And I'm on Instagram at Elise Loehnen. Yes. And that's it.
That's it. And everyone, for those of you who have not heard Elise's podcast, they are so thought-provoking. Guests are such, just amazing thinkers, good people. And of course, your newsletter, it's always provoking us to think. So
thank you.
Find it, everyone.
Such a pleasure.
Everyone, so thank you for listening. You know what I'm going to ask you to do. Please send this to everyone you know who will benefit, which is, I believe, everyone that you know. Thank you for your 5-star reviews. Thanks for being a part of our community. Elise, if you ever want to have another conversation with a man about any of this stuff, you know where to find me.
I'll call you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. The final 2 things, you know what I'm going to say. Try to be the person you want your child to become, and ask yourself the guiding question: what footprint do you want to leave?
Beautiful.
This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Strummerman, composed and performed by Pro Tunes. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.